I'm Lindy. Almost a year ago, I left my marriage that was abusive and highly toxic. I've experienced many symptoms of narcissistic abuse and battered woman syndrome, such as feeling like everything was my fault, being highly confused about conversations due to gaslighting, and more. It wasn't until I listened to the stories of others who had experienced the same kind of abuse and neglect that I realized the reality of the abuse cycle that I was in, and I got out. I'm in the process of healing and retraining my brain after years and years of narcissistic abuse. Hearing others' wake-up calls and how they healed and are healing from their abuse has helped me in my journey so much. So I'm here to help share the stories of the voices that were unheard, ignored, and belittled, and share what has helped me and them heal from this kind of trauma. Let's get out of survival mode and learn how to be happy and whole again, together. This is Behind Closed Doors. I'm your host, Lindy. For the privacy of our guests and their abusers, we are referring to the abusers as my ex and will not call them by name. Please be advised that Behind Closed Doors covers topics that may be triggering to some listeners, including discussions of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Please take care while listening.
And then it got to, within I'd say 4 months into our marriage, we went to Tennessee, and I don't think we let his mom see him. I think we let his family see him over there, though. It was his aunt and his cousins and all of them, because they were all awesome people and they really wanted to see him. So we go to Tennessee for a week or two, and I remember dropping him off with his aunt, and so that was going to be our honeymoon finally. But it was in Tennessee in the woods, and he got a cabin for us. And I remember at the cabin, something set him off. I can't recall what it was. But I basically had to run from him. I don't remember what happened, but I ran, I got into the bathroom. There were 2 doors to get into the bathroom, one from the living room area, one from the room. And I had locked both the doors, and he was hitting the door so hard, he ended up breaking it. He broke the door down, and anyway, so that happened. And then the next day he apologized. We go to Ace Hardware and get a bunch of stuff to fix the door. Had to get a new door, had to get a bunch of tools, and literally replace the door at the Airbnb because he had broke the door down.
How did you feel about that?
I was definitely scared of him. This whole time I was scared of him. So I just did what he said when he said it, because it was what else do you do? It was either that or it was fighting. Or even when I did do what he said, there was fighting. So I just kept my head down and did what I needed to do to stay out of fights as often as possible.
Yeah.
So it was basically his way or the highway. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is 3 months in. We ended up doing that trip. We left, went back to Vegas, and...
Was the baby with you when you guys went on that trip to see his family?
Yes, but he was at his aunt's when all of this was happening.
Gotcha.
Pretty much by the time we got back with him, now my ex started being more abusive to his son.
Okay.
Not just me. The baby was also getting some of it.
And he was
and it wasn't physical. Point? Well, okay, I'm lying, because he would spank him, and he was a baby. He was 1 year old, just barely turned 1. And he'd be spanking him and leaving bruises on him, when he spanked him.
That's way too hard.
He wouldn't hit him or his face or his arms or anything like that. It was his butt. So he technically in his mind was oh, well, I'm a parent and I'm allowed to spank my child.
Right.
So whenever I'd be you can't do that. I don't like that. He's just a baby. You shouldn't be spanking him. He's well, he's my kid.
After all that work that you've done, staying up all night.
Yeah. But also he's a baby, and he doesn't know what he's doing.
No.
And he was just so hard on him. And it was he's crying because he's a baby. You don't spank your kid for crying out.
Yeah.
Just turned 1 year old.
That's awful.
And there would be bruises all over his butt, sometimes like the top of his thighs, because he would just like spank him out of nowhere. And he was obviously doing it too hard.
That's really hard because I spank my children. I didn't start spanking them until, well, I don't spank Liam. So I didn't start spanking Abbie until she was 3. Because, they just don't understand
They just don't get it.
But I have literally never in my life
left a bruise.
So to have multiple bruises.
No, it was like a common thing.
That's
and I would
crazy.
just like sit there and cry with him and just
my
we would just sit in his room and cry and like I'd rock him to sleep. And I think
that's so sad.
Really hard.
Yeah.
And I would always try to protect him, but like I couldn't. Because when I would, it was like we were both getting screamed at. We were both getting like all of this, and I look back on it and I'm like, I feel like a horrible person for keeping him in that position. And I was like, would he have been better off with his drug addict mom? Like, I don't know.
Well, you're an amazing mom to him, and he needed.
I feel like him and I had each other at the time.
Right.
Like I think he needed me and I needed him at the time, and it was just really hard.
Yeah.
And I have like moments where I look back and I'm like, I'm so thankful for him. He was like the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
And then I have moments where I'm just like, and I think of things that I don't think about often. And I'm like, wow, like he went through a lot too, you know? He was just a baby. And like, that's what he was seeing was us fighting every day. And he was seeing like someone, not only like I was terrified of his dad. So like, I think about how terrified he must have been of his dad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
For like a baby to be so terrified of their parent.
And not know what's going on.
And I'm the adult. I'm the other adult in the house. And I was so confused and manipulated myself that I was like not getting out of it.
Right.
And it wasn't because I didn't want to, it was because I didn't know how and I was scared. But I was just like, what do I do? I was at my end, and we were only 4 or 5 months into our marriage at this point.
Gosh.
And it was just like, yeah, I don't know. I was like, I think I told him at this point, like, that I was over it. He was like punching holes in the walls everywhere. He was constantly like getting in my face. There were several times where he had like, I would try to leave and he would like not let me leave. Like physically, he would grab me, hold me on the ground, like you're not leaving. And he would leave bruises on me.
Yeah.
It wasn't just from KJ getting spankings, getting bruises. Like him and I both had bruises from his dad.
Right.
And that was just like our everyday life. It wasn't like, oh, he did this one day and then like a month later or something happened. At this point, it was every single day. It was every day, every night, all day long. Like something in the house is getting broken.
Right.
Someone's getting hurt. Somebody's like, and he would have his moments like where he would act normal, but it was very few and far in between that he was normal. It was mostly not.
And
so like all of that beginning stuff and the love bombing and all that was gone.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Completely
was
gone.
It back to the way was it that normal, or was it like this new normal of just not
the new normal of just not screaming at us?
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think you've mentioned yet, he wasn't allowing you to work at this point.
No. So right before we got married, he had told me like, listen, you don't need to work. Like I have a good job. And so I quit my job and stayed home. And then after that, I was like, well, like I want to go back to work. That wasn't allowed. Like, cause I would be out around people.
Right.
So like I couldn't work. I had to wear whatever he told me to wear. I had to do whatever he told me to do. I wasn't even going to grocery stores at this point because of how many arguments we had gotten in just leaving the house. Like I didn't leave the house because I was just like, I don't want to cause any more issues. So like anytime we needed groceries or we needed something, I would make the list. He would go get it.
Wow.
And
he allowed that. He preferred that.
Oh yeah, for sure. He was like, he would rather me be inside where like I couldn't cheat on him, even though I never had. But he was constantly accusing me of cheating. That was the stem of all of our arguments, was that I was cheating on him in some way. Even though I never left the house, and he was the one always out doing things, you know? And so I think he was probably cheating on me that whole time. I just didn't have any proof. And so like he would leave and go like smoke with his friends or something, and he would call me, and I'm making dinner for like our family, waiting for him to come home, and I wouldn't answer my phone because I'm making dinner and it was on the counter. And then I turn around and I'm like, oh shit, he's calling. Like I need to answer this right away.
Right.
So then I run over and I miss the call, and I'm like, oh fuck.
You already know you're in trouble.
Know, like something's gonna happen. So then I call him back right away, and he's like, what are you doing? Why didn't you answer my phone call right away? And I'd be like, I'm sorry, like I'm just making dinner. Like I turned around, he's like, who's at the house? Like I'm on my way right now. Who's at our house? And I'm like, I'm literally making dinner. Like I can FaceTime you right now. So then I'd have to FaceTime him, show him around the entire house.
Oh my goodness.
And like, so he could see that nobody was there. And he'd be like, well, somebody could have just like left out the door when I called you, or you know what I mean? Like there's always something.
Yeah.
There was always like something in the back of his mind, like I could be doing something, or I am doing something. And it was probably because he was the one out cheating, and so he felt guilty, so he had to like accuse me every single day.
I do think that is something that abusers do, is when they are in the wrong and they are feeling guilty, that is when they gaslight you the most, and they make you feel, because I think in a way they are ashamed of themselves, but of course they can never just come and admit feeling, well, first admit the wrong that they did, but then second,
they're never wrong.
Right, of course not.
Yeah.
But then also to admit like that they are ashamed of it. So then, of course they're just going to take it out on you.
Yeah. And he loved, this is kind of changing the subject, but he loved using God against me. We kind of talked about this before we started. How like they like to do that. And especially when they know that that's something that's really important to you, they'll take the things that are important to you and turn it against you.
Exactly.
So the big thing that he would do is we always had a Bible in the living room. We always had one in our room. Like pretty much had a Bible in every room. He would, whatever room we were arguing at the time, he would pick up the Bible, and this was like every day. And he'd be like, put your hand on the Bible and tell me you're not like,
oh my goodness.
Tell me, swear to God, swear on the Bible and to God that you're telling me the truth. So it was like constantly every day using that. A lot of things that we would get into arguments about was like my past relationships. And he loved to call me a hoe. He loved to call me a slut. Like that was pretty much my name back then. Like,
and you were not, like, I knew you back then. You were not a hoe.
But that's like what he liked to do, because I knew it would get to me.
Make you feel guilty,
So then he'd be like, okay, so like in this relationship, what did you guys do? And I'd be like, what do you want? He'd be like sexually. Like, and he would want every single detail of what we did, when we did it, the first time we ever did anything. And then he'd want like literally down to like the nitty gritty details. He'd want it. And I would be like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't feel comfortable talking about this. Like it has nothing to do with our relationship. And then basically he'd quiz me. So then like a month later, he'd ask me the same question. And if it didn't line up perfectly with what I said the first time, then it was like, you're a liar. Like you're a bitch. Like you've been lying to me this whole time. You lied to God. You put your hand on the Bible and said that this is what happened. And now you're changing your story.
Wow.
So it was like, yeah, it was that every day.
So with him doing that to you, because that's spiritual abuse right there. How did you feel your walk with God was at that time? At that time,
it was not great. I mean, I was like praying every day.
Right.
But it was because of the situation I was in. And I was in my Bible, not every day, but often. And it was usually like every time he would come at me for something, then I would like go to my Bible to read my Bible. And I'd be like, just asking God for something. Like I just need something. I just need like anything to get me out of this place. And it just sucked. It was like, initially, when our relationship started, it was great because we had that together. And then he used that against me often. And then when I was in my marriage, I was like ashamed, and I didn't want to bring that to God because I was like, I did this. Right? Like I put myself in this position, and I should have listened, and I should have. And it also sucked because like I moved in with him before I got married, and I always knew like I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I slept with him before I was married, and all of these things that you grow up as a Christian, and you're like, yeah, these, God's not going to hate you for this, but this is something you shouldn't do.
Like a no, yeah.
Yeah. And so I was doing all those things, and I thought like I was being punished for not obeying God.
Yeah.
And I felt like I should have done better. I should have known. And that like, this was my punishment now. Was like, you're stuck in this relationship, and God also doesn't like divorce.
Right.
So are you going to divorce this guy and like keep disappointing God? And he would tell me that too. He'd be like, well, like when I would say that I didn't want to be in the relationship or anything anymore, then he'd be like, well, like, you're just going to keep being a bad Christian? Like, you know what I mean?
Right, of course.
It was constantly like, I could never do anything right. No matter what it was, I was always in the wrong. And he always made me believe that I was. By the end of it, I was like, you're right. Like, I am. I'm the one in the wrong. Like, you're acting like this because of me. Like, everything was my fault. And I believed it at this point.
Yeah.
I was so messed up in the head, and I didn't even know like what I was doing. And then at this point, he had me like, because he smoked weed a lot every day from the time he woke up to the time he went to sleep. He was smoking weed. So then, of course, I started smoking weed with him, and then I just wanted to smoke weed because I didn't want to think about anything. I didn't want to feel anything.
Right.
And I was doing it to like try to get away from all of that, which weed is not like, you're not like not yourself.
Right.
It's more just like, it definitely helps.
Tones down like the anxiety.
Yes. So, and then when he would be screaming at me, I would just be like emotionless because I would just smoke my weed, and I would just let him scream at me because I was like, all right, like this is what I get, and this is how it is. And yeah, so at the time I was definitely smoking a lot of weed, and I have lupus, and it's like actually prescribed to me, but it was more than I should have been. Like now I can go weeks without smoking weed. I don't need to. I usually, if I need to, it's right before bed. Right. And it's like every once in a while. It's not just for the heck of it every day, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time it had gotten to the point where it was like all day, every day. Because like, why not?
You wanted to escape your reality.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, at this point we end up leaving Vegas. I had told him that I wanted to leave him, and he was like, yeah, that's not happening. Like, let's compromise. His compromise was, I wanted to move home to Montana because my parents had moved back, and he was like, well, I'm okay with Seattle. He was like, it's closer than Vegas.
So he would be moving with you, or you could just move? Oh, okay.
So we all ended up packing everything up, got a U-Haul, moved to Seattle. We get there, and at this point, my parents know like things aren't good. Right. My family knows things aren't good. They know he's abusive at this point, and they were like willing to do whatever. I asked my mom, or no, he had to like go back to Vegas that week that we moved down there. Because he needed to like pick something up. So I asked my mom to come visit. She did. And he was cool because she was there. And then like 2 months later, after we moved there, he has to go back to Vegas for something. Because he had left some stuff there. And then goes to pick it up and he's like, well, you need like your mom or somebody to be here because he wanted like somebody to have eyes on me at all times.
Wow.
So basically my mom comes up, she's with me. He calls me and is like accusing me of cheating or something on the phone, and my mom's standing right there and she hears how he's talking to me and can like hear calling me a bitch and a hoe and all of these things, like, and that was my daily reality, like that was normal for me, but my mom heard it and she was like, is this how he talks to you? And I was like, yeah, like this is my life right now. And so then she's like, oh my gosh, you need to come home with me. Like, she being there was the reason that I moved back to Montana. And I told him, I was like, you can either come with me or you can divorce me right now.
So is that when you went back to Montana after that?
We all packed up from Seattle after 2 months, moved to Montana.
Okay.
And then at this point, I'm at least in the same town as my family.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, at least if I'm going through this, I have my family.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually talked to your mom the other day. We were chatting, and I think this is important because she said something along the lines of she did go and visit you during that time.
Yeah.
And although she could tell, you know, that you were hurting, that you were clearly being like abused, and she did encourage you to move back and to leave, you were like, no, I'm fine. I love this man. I don't want to divorce him. You know, we're good. Yeah. And she also said something to the effect of like, you were so good at kind of like convincing that everything was okay. And she was saying how, of course, she didn't want to. I think as a parent, when you watch your kid go through something abusive, because my mom did the same exact thing with me, you don't want to break ties because you know
because I had no friends at this point.
Right.
I had no job. I had no life.
You're completely isolated.
Even if I was talking to my mom, he would be sitting there listening. So my parents didn't know if they could call me or not or talk to me. Right. And when they did, they knew they had to be very careful about what they said because he was always there listening.
That's so scary.
So, and even like with my cousins texting me and stuff, if they would, like, I had a guy cousin text me and he freaked out.
Oh my gosh.
Like, it didn't matter if it was family, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
If it was friends, it didn't matter. As long if it was a guy, that's what it was. I also had a girlfriend that was like, that I went to college with, and she was like bisexual or something. And he was just like, you're not allowed to be friends with her anymore.
Oh my goodness.
Because apparently I was going to be bisexual. Like, that was like his thought process was like, oh, well, she can't be around lesbians.
She would change
She can't be around bisexual people, and she can't be around any man ever on the face of this earth, whether it's her freaking boy cousin or a 70-year-old man at the grocery store. Like,
dropping bananas.
Yeah. And I remember it so perfectly because of how shocked I was at, and how, like, what happened after, you know what I mean? So I was just like, I don't know, that stuck with me for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I do think though, like, your mom is an amazing woman, just like you. And like, I know that she was like there for you. As much as she could be. Exactly.
Yeah. And she knew she couldn't like overstep. And I was obviously so manipulated and so in my head and thinking that I was always in the wrong because that's how he turned it on me and made me feel that I was like, no, it's fine. Everything's fine. Like, I'm going to figure this out. Like, we're going to get through this. I married this person. I need to like stick by their side. He's going to get help. And that was the other thing. He kept saying like, I'm going to get help. He was like, I just need to get on meds. I just need to go to therapy. I just need. So like, these were things we were driving. Once we moved to Montana, we were driving to Spokane every week, once a week for therapy, every Wednesday.
Wow.
We would go, we would pick up his meds once a month, and we would do his therapy every week. So we were driving back and forth from Spokane constantly. And I would always stick up for him and be like, oh, well, like, he hasn't been on his meds that long. He's switching meds constantly because this one's not working. So, and they say typically it takes like 3 to 6 months for your medication to work and blah, 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 whatever. As like in the back of my head, knowing like, I know he doesn't take his meds. Or when I ask him to take his meds, he's like, I don't want to. But then like when something big would happen, something crazy, because it was always fighting, but like the huge, crazy, like like physically or like threatening to the point where I was scared for my life.
Right.
Those would probably happen like every 2 weeks to a month.
Mm.
And then when those happen, I would threaten to leave, and then he'd be like, I'm gonna get help.
Mm.
And then he would like love bomb, and he would try to pretend to do all the right things so that I would stay.
And what do you mean by try to pretend? He wasn't
So he'd
actually
be like,
doing them?
no. So he'd be like, I'm taking my medication, or I'll get on a new medication. I'll go to the doctor tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? It was like always, he was on it immediately because he was like, oh, she's gonna leave.
It's like it's almost rehearsed. It's like they almost know exactly what to say and
what
how
to do
act.
to keep you around longer.
Right.
And that's what was happening. And so I ended up moving in with my parents because we had gotten a marriage counselor. He's like, we just need a marriage counselor. I was like, all right, let's do it. So we get a marriage counselor, and she was awesome. She actually was like, we had done a couple sessions with her. He's like, I love her. She's great, blah, blah, blah. Then we move, and this was when we were in Seattle. Then we moved to Montana, and we're doing it over FaceTime. And I don't remember what happened. Something big happened. I call her one day when it wasn't like our scheduled thing, and he had like left really quick to go probably get alcohol or something. It was like a quick one. So I was like, I need to call her right now and just explain to her what's happening. So I call her and I tell her, and she's like, you need to get out of there immediately. Like, she's like, I don't think you're going to be alive if you stay in this relationship. And like when she said that, I was just like, oh shit. Like, my marriage counselor, who's also a Christian, who also doesn't want divorce, because that was one of the biggest things we talked about. She was just like, she's like, I don't condone it, but I also am not gonna like judge you for it, you know? She was like, yeah, you need to get out of there. You need to live in a different home. Like, you can't be in the same home with him, or I don't think you're like, things are gonna, you're not gonna be here, was basically how she said it. So that day I call my parents and I'm like, hey, can I move in with you guys? Which is only like 5 minutes from where our apartment was at the time. And obviously they're like, yep, come on over. So I move in with them. He hated it. And then he was like, we're not seeing her anymore. She sucks. Like, the marriage counselor. He was just like, obviously, like, she's biased, whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. So then we stopped talking to her after that. When I moved in with my parents, I found out about Safe Harbor. So once I found out about them, I go every Tuesday night at 5:30, and I'm there every single Tuesday, and I'm telling him, like, this is what I'm doing. I'm also getting a job. I was starting to like get my independence back once I moved out. I would be there every day, because I would be there with KJ every day, and I put him to sleep every night. I'd give him his bath every night. Like, I would still do like dinner, bath, and putting him to sleep. It was like our routine. I didn't want to like get out of that. And obviously I loved him so much, and didn't want to leave him. I just wanted to leave his dad, and I couldn't take him. So that wasn't an option at the time. So then I'm going to Safe Harbor. I'm talking to these other women who have been in similar situations, and that was like kind of the first step of getting out of there. And through all this, he's love bombing. I show up one night to go put KJ to bed, and he's got like this whole like little surprise set out for me in the living room. And he's like, just like read through it. And it was like these boxes that led to more boxes that led to more boxes. And then by the end of it, it was like, oh, we're going to Hawaii.
Wow.
Like, we're going to,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Here you go.
Yeah.
We're going on this amazing vacation together, even though we're not together and I treat you terribly.
Yes. So then I was like, okay, like, and my parents were even like, don't go, whatever. I was like, okay, well, maybe like he's changed this time. I just need to see. So then I ended up going with him. It was like maybe 3 days. It was like the quickest Hawaii trip ever. But he acted like he did in the beginning when we went. It was like there was no fights, there was no arguments. He didn't care if a guy looked at me. He actually like bought me these like super cute dresses and stuff. They were like sexy dresses for like date nights and stuff. They weren't like Little House on the Prairie.
Right, what you were wearing.
Which is like
men's sweats.
I wasn't even allowed to wear dresses at the time. So it was like a whole different side of him, like in the beginning, how we were, basically. And I was like, okay, well, things might be changing, getting better, whatever. So I had waited 6 months. I had moved out for 6 months. That happened. I think like halfway through, so like 3 months in, he ends up showing up. My parents left for work and he showed up at like 8 a.m, banging on the door and my window and wakes me up. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's freaking out. And he's like, we can't do this anymore. Like, you need to come home, blah, blah, blah. He's like screaming at me for like an hour. And my parents see him on the Ring camera and call the cops.
Good.
Next time on Behind Closed Doors.
We get in this huge fight. He's throwing stuff around and he's punching all the walls and the doors and throwing me around at this point. And then the neighbors call the cops. And they're like something's going on over there because like he's screaming, I'm screaming, like, and then there's things getting thrown. And
the content shared on Behind Closed Doors is intended for informational purposes only. I am not a therapist, doctor, or licensed mental health professional. The stories and experiences shared by our guests are personal and unique to them. While I take precautions to validate the authenticity of the events discussed, please note that these are individual perspectives and may not reflect the experiences of others. If you or someone you know is in need of professional support, please seek help from a qualified therapist or medical professional. If you or someone you know is being abused, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. If you or someone you know is experiencing a suicidal crisis or emotional distress, please call 1-800-273-8255. For more resources, please click the link in the description box.